I'm Pontius, and welcome back to Unexpected Awesome. When it comes to James Bond spy action movies, most people associate the series with either the action genre or the adventure, or almost comic book superhero kind of story. However, as its literary roots show, it is genuinely and deeply rooted in the spy thrillers. And while Timothy Dalton may have almost entirely pioneered those concepts inside of the series, arguably more effectively, ultimately it's Daniel Craig who's more associated with that tone of 007 film than almost any of the other actors who played him. His earlier films are generally considered some of the better in the series, with the first and third movies he did being earmarked as the best. But I would argue that out of all of these movies, the one with the best story, the one that captures that of an earnest and genuine grounded spy thriller, as well as character-driven drama, is easily 2009's Quantum of Solace. QOS has a very checkered reputation amongst 007 fans, largely because of legitimately questionable criticisms. However, one of the most famous often levied against it is entirely inaccurate, and is easily the reason this film should stand as tall as Casino Royale, and I would argue, taller than Skyfall. Quantum of Solace has a lot of fine qualities about it that make it not only a genuine classic and first inside the James Bond series, but these aspects to it are genuinely positive qualities in elevating other aspects of the movie's production and writing. Essentially, overall, the story of Quantum of Solace is that 007 goes rogue from MI6 to track down the plan and conspirators of a massive criminal organization seeking to dominate the world through monopolistic economic control of its utilities by zeroing in on and foiling their largest and most recent campaign involving attempting to seize control of the entire water supply inside of the politically unstable Bolivia. Dodging assassins, moles, as well as his own allies being turned against him by the insidious influence of the corporate used car salesman that is the villain of the story, Dominic Green. He corners him inside of the burning and smoking wreckage of a hotel whose architecture I can only surmise is designed by the insane love child of the descendants of the man who designed the Hindenburg and the Umbrella Corporation's private architect, in possibly one of the driest deserts on the planet. After extracting the information from his lead, he leaves him in the middle of the desert with a vindictive metaphor and drives off back to MI6 with his mirror image ally in tow, both of their souls closer to at peace with the wrongs that they have received, and flying off to Russia, pursue a lead to bring justice and root out the corruption inside of Her Majesty's Secret Service. Quantum of Solace is an excellent movie for a variety of reasons, but I'd first like to give the criticisms their time in the sun. The statements of the poor quality of the direction of this film, particularly towards the second unit work of the action set pieces, is the most accurate. I don't know whether or not it was a personal decision by Mark Forster to emulate the talents of Paul Greengrass, whom he genuinely admired, or if it was a committee decision made by the producers to try to ape a more successful contemporary franchise. But the decision for shaky cam and fast editing is just a very poor choice, and the worst part of it is that there is a technique and motif that help accommodate this directorial style in an incredibly solid fashion. One of the biggest criticisms of shaky cam and fast editing approaches is that it doesn't allow for the audience to see both sides of the fight inside of the same frame before it cuts to another side. It's more like a punch gets its own edit rather than you just see the fight happening. It obscures the fight rather than highlights it. Mark Forster and his director of photography, at least in the first three major set pieces of the film, not only have relatively more calm editing and better geography, but they have a really interesting trick where they use reflective surfaces like the side of a car or the windows inside of a dining room in an opera house to reflect where the opposing forces are against the hero or the villain inside of the scene, to give the audience a good idea of where things are and how the fight is actually going. It's in the opera house chase, however, where Bond is being pursued by the agents of the conspiracy, just exposed and photographed as they try to protect their identities in order to ferret out who they are, that there is a point in which a shot of the same stairwell repeats at least 3 times to showcase a enemy goon chasing him up those stairs to the roof, that the whole direction of the action just sort of goes off the rails. After that, everything from boat chases to shootouts to brawls inside of exploding buildings turns into almost visual nonsense, and it's just hard to follow. But if you can stomach that relatively bitter pill, you're in for one of the best films in the James Bond catalog. As I've indicated before, one of the strongest aspects of the movie is the writing, and that is almost everything. The characters, the setting are almost expertly written, and this is doubly impressive considering the director and the main star of Daniel Craig himself were essentially given a rough draft with some ideas for where the plot could go by the main writers of the film, Wade and Purvis, before they had to go on strike with the Writers Guild. And then, as they were filming, they had to fill in what the specifics of the stories and plot could be, and it manifests as a supremely impressive story on a script level. Ultimately, the story is considered to be about revenge, but early on, it's very strongly indicated that 007 is motivated not by a desire to get revenge for Vesper Lynd on the people who forced her to betray him, but ultimately to root out the entire conspiracy threatening those he values now, that being MI6 itself. This is particularly highlighted in one of my favorite scenes in the movie, where M and Bond are investigating the apartment of her personal bodyguard, who turned out to be a double agent sent to not only monitor her, but also try to assassinate her, so that way one of their top bigwigs, bagmen from the main conspiracy of Casino Royale, to get away. And they eventually discover a lead based on sequentially marked bills leaked into Le Chiffre's operation that they found in that corrupt bodyguard's possession. That points them to another bagman inside of a almost idealistically looking Port-au-Prince, Haiti, pre-ongoing gang siege, in which he discovers not only a potential ally, but also the seeds of another criminal conspiracy. Mark of his attempted questions, answers, and efforts to stop said dastardly plot ultimately pushes that dastardly villain to utilize his influence to pressure M into containing 007, which not only redoubles his resolve, but also makes his bond between him and M grow even stronger than from the first film, giving them not only a mentor-like relationship, but one of strongly implicit trust. It also puts him in contact with a character whom has a mirror image to his own motivations, one seeking to achieve whatever means necessary to get close to the vicious general that slaughtered and tortured her family. Eventually, he discovers the main plot of the villain, and with some help from his CIA contact, Felix corners the villains and ends their dastardly plot. If there's anything to say about the plot of this movie, when it's not awkwardly attempting to convey excitement through editing so spasmodic it's foaming at the mouth, it's actually got one of the most shockingly well-paced character work, with the greatest character arcs being those of redemption. Camille goes from searching for revenge to genuinely trying to rebuild her country into a better place. M learns to finally trust Bond as well as his and her own instincts, while Leiter and Renee Mathis ultimately showcase not only their integrity, but also redeem themselves with forgiveness. It makes the ending being set in the middle of the dead of night in snow-blanketed Siberia, with the woman's romantic dreams shattered with the steel hammer of the truth. It's a hopeful ending that the world can be a better place, and these people who operate and live in shadows can be part of the light that guides it there. Now, what of the story? One of the biggest complaints I hear about this story is easily that it's boring and doesn't make sense. Why on earth would anybody engineer a political conspiracy and assassinate bucket loads of nobodies and high-up officials to control the water supply? I don't know, man. Maybe you could ask the thousands of skeletons buried in the Honduran rainforest about the price of bananas and see what their response would be like, and to your little query about only the second most valuable commodity on the planet. The story makes sense. The plot details, the way they line up, even just the little statements the characters make between saying things, it all lines up to a perfectly believable and the oh-so-desired aspect of a grounded world. It is a spy thriller first and foremost, and instead of drawing their inspiration from cartoons or camp, the director, the writers, and the main star drew their inspirations from actual headlines of real political scandals to guide their vision of what this story would be. And what it delivers is a well-told and thought-out story illustrated by excellent performances. This is Daniel Craig's finest hour as 007. Casino Royale is a darn near masterpiece and probably the better film, and almost entirely for its action direction and its emotional hook. But that emotional hook doesn't undermine Quantum of Solace. It bolsters the investment the character has. Quiet, soft-spoken, yet slyly charismatic, he utterly embodies the super cool and ultimately suave nature of 007, but also, especially in his largely platonic and almost professional collaboration with Camille Montez, my favorite Bond girl of the entire series, the gentility of the character of 007. That level of quality is not just present with Daniel Craig, but everybody. Giancarlo Giannini, Dame Judi Dench, and easily my second favorite Olga Kurylenko performance. Every one of them naturally lives and breathes their character on the screen, managing to effortlessly convey them as if they are real. And oh boy, Matthew Amalric's oily and unlikable performance as Dominic Green. He comes across as petty and slick, like the way he says things and the way he demands specific details from what you're saying, but never giving more than vague details in his own. He comes across as a man who's utterly dishonest, yet never has to tell a lie, largely because he's manipulating your very understanding of the conversation itself. It's an amazing performance, and one that utterly sells this vile stain of what could be technically considered a man. It makes his ultimate end of being stranded in the middle of the desert just all that much more satisfying. Well, that's really all I have to say. If you're looking for the shot caller of James Bond movies, look no further than Quantum of Solace. Stay golden.
Only a fool forgets to live. An easy thing to say, the past